In the early 1900s, the Russian Empire spanned nearly a sixth of the Earth's landmass. This vast territory was controlled by a single man, Tsar Nicholas II, the latest in a 300-year line of absolute rulers known as the Romanovs. But underneath that royal wealth, Russia was undergoing a rapid, brutal industrialization. Millions of peasants migrated to cities to work in dark, dangerous factories for 14 hours a day. They earned barely enough to survive, returning to overcrowded, disease-ridden slums. The empire was operating with a structural flaw. It was an archaic, medieval-style autocracy, attempting to manage a modernizing industrial economy. The Tsar possessed total authority, yet he had no mechanism to address the daily reality of his increasingly desperate workforce. This rigid separation between the ruling class and the working population created a state of constant tension. The Russian Empire had become a high-pressure boiler, completely sealed off, waiting for a single spark to ignite it. That first spark arrived in 1905. Pushed to the brink by poverty, thousands of citizens marched peacefully toward the Winter Palace in St. Petersburg. They carried religious icons and petitions, asking the Tsar for basic labor protections and a living wage. The military response was immediate. Soldiers opened fire on the unarmed crowd, killing hundreds. This massacre, known as Bloody Sunday, shattered the illusion of a benevolent ruler. For many, it proved the Tsar would only protect his power with their lives. This diagram shows the logistical mismatch of World War I. Russia mobilized 12 million men, yet rifles and equipment remained critically low. This lack of preparation caused a battlefield collapse. They suffered devastating losses against German forces, resulting in 2 million casualties in 3 years. The disaster at the front created a feedback loop at home. Conscripting millions of peasant farmers meant massive labor shortages in the fields. Agricultural output dropped, and as the military command hoarded remaining grain, the major cities were left to starve. World War I forced the state to choose between feeding its soldiers and feeding its citizens. By trying to sustain a total war with an archaic infrastructure, the Romanovs lost the logistical capacity to keep the country functioning. By February 1917, the pressure became unbearable. It started with female textile workers taking to the streets of Petrograd to demand bread. Within days, hundreds of thousands of factory workers joined them, effectively shutting down the capital. When the Tsar ordered the local military to suppress the uprising, the soldiers refused. Instead of firing on the crowd, they defected and joined the protesters, leaving the monarchy with no way to enforce its will. Without the support of the army, the 300-year-old dynasty ended in hours. Tsar Nicholas II signed a document of abdication while stranded on a train outside the capital. The monarchy was gone, but the crisis remained. Its removal created a power vacuum at the center of the world's largest country. Into this void stepped two separate groups: a provisional government of moderate politicians and a network of grassroots working-class councils known as Soviets. This diagram illustrates the dual power system that paralyzed the country. With the official government pulling the state one way and the local Soviets pulling the other, the mechanism of leadership gridlocked. They could not agree on how to end the war or distribute grain. In April 1917, a radical Marxist revolutionary named Vladimir Lenin returned from exile. He arrived specifically to exploit this political gridlock. Lenin avoided complex policy debates, offering instead a direct three-word pitch to a desperate public: peace, land, bread. He promised to end the war, seize the estates for the peasants, and feed the cities. By targeting the most immediate needs of the population, Lenin positioned his Bolshevik faction as the only alternative to a dying and paralyzed government. Lenin and the Bolsheviks executed the October Revolution as a meticulously planned paramilitary operation. Under the cover of darkness, armed squads bypassed traditional political centers and seized Petrograd's vital infrastructure. They took control of the telegraph stations, the railway hubs, and the bridges in a matter of hours. The provisional government was cut off from all communication and collapsed with minimal resistance. The Bolsheviks moved into the Winter Palace and officially claimed power. Lenin's faction had successfully taken control of the nation by seizing its modern logistics and communications. The reboot of the state was immediate. The Bolsheviks abolished the private ownership of land and nationalized major industries, marking the birth of the Soviet state. But enforcing this mandate triggered immediate resistance. Anti-communist factions and former loyalists took up arms, plunging the nation into a multi-year civil war. Between the fighting and the agricultural collapse, a massive famine swept the countryside. The civil war resulted in millions of deaths, most of them civilians caught in the crossfire of the new order. The revolution began with a demand for bread and ended with a famine. While the Bolsheviks successfully dismantled the old order, the cost of establishing the new one was years of internal warfare and a loss of life that dwarfed the initial protests. The events of 1917 transformed Russia from a struggling agrarian empire into a radical ideological state. This shift immediately put the nation on a collision course with the rest of the industrialized world. The collapse of the Romanovs shows that removing an oppressive system often leaves a vacuum filled not by peace, but by whatever force is organized enough to seize the controls. In 1917, that force was the Bolsheviks, and their rise changed the trajectory of the 20th century.